This episode of Goosebumps Crew is sponsored by Trophy Smack. Celebrate your wins and losses in style with your own customizable trophies, belts, and rings. Link in the description, but more on that later.
The most thrilling, spine-tingling series ever.
From the pages of R.L. Stein's best-selling books,
And the screams go on forever and ever.
We now return to Goosebumps.
Greetings, Goosebumps fans, young and old, big and small. Welcome back to the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. As always, I am your host, Isaiah Vargas, also known as the Goosebumps channel on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'm joined by the rest of my Goosebumps crew. Goosebumps Aussie fan Bjorn Panlik, Shawn Nick Shawn, the ultimate Goosebumps man, Michael Lilliquist. And we're back to what else? Talk some more Goosebumps. And I hope you guys at home are ready to start a play, because we're going to be talking about today Goosebumps The Musical, Phantom of the Auditorium. This is the stage show and subsequent cast recording that began in 2016. It is an adaptation of course, book number 24, the same name, Phantom of the Auditorium. And it's gotten quite a cult following in recent years. Ever since 2021 with the release of the cast recording, it's become probably the most well-known live production in the Goosebumps franchise. And of course, to talk about it with us here today, we have the creators of Goosebumps The Musical, John Maclay and Danny Abosch. We're very excited to have you guys here. Welcome to the Goosebumps Crew.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Happy
you.
to be here.
Happy to be here, yeah.
Absolutely, and we're very happy to talk with you guys. Of course, we're going to be talking about the musical, both the live performances that have taken place over the years, as well as the cast recording released in 2021. But first, before we get into that, if you guys, of course, are not following the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, then you guys are seriously missing out, because if you love Goosebumps or you are a Goosebumps fan, then you are certainly going to want to tune into the Goosebumps Crew. Not only do we talk about Goosebumps every single episode, different topics, whether it be books, movies, TV show, whatever, but we also, like Danny and John, have some incredible guests on the podcast. Most recently, we've had Avery Jones, who was the puppeteer for Slappy in the Goosebumps movies. We've had Eugene Lipinski, who played Mr. Mortman in The Girl Who Cried Monster. And among that, we've had folks like Tim Jacobus, the original Goosebumps illustrator. We've had Kai Eric Erickson and Scott Wickware, who have appeared in Goosebumps episodes. And we've had many other guests that are just amazing people. It's been a true treat. And if you guys love Goosebumps, you guys are going to want to subscribe and follow the Goosebumps Crew Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All right, so let's get in to the main meat and potatoes of tonight. Of course, we are talking about the Goosebumps musical, Phantom of the Auditorium. Now, for a little background, this Goosebumps musical had its world premiere in 2016. I believe it had its world premiere in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Portland, Oregon. And it is, of course, an adaptation of the 24th book in the original Goosebumps series, Phantom of the Auditorium. And it makes sense because that book deals with a stage performance at a school show that is supposedly haunted by the phantom of the subsequent play. And there's a lot of spooky, ghostly happenings going on. And the play, of course, as an adaptation, follows a lot of that. It follows two kids who are setting up a play at their middle school. They're doing a stage show called The Phantom. And they're very excited because they both have lead roles. Brooke, the main character, is playing Esmeralda, and Zeke is playing the Phantom. But they soon find out that there might be a real phantom that's making, just causing all kinds of trouble. They might be living underneath the stage. So there's a lot of spooky happenings going on. Now, as I said, this had all began in 2016, so it's been about 8 years now since this stage show started. And I guess my first question for you guys is, how did you guys get involved with creating a Goosebumps musical or stage play?
I'll take that. So I was in New York meeting with my agent, Susan Gurman, and we were talking about some other projects, and she does a lot of work with Scholastic. And said in the meeting, said, "Hey, do you think Goosebumps would work as a show, as a live show, either as a children's show or anything? Like, what do you think about that?" And my initial answer was like, I don't know. Like, I think it would be great. I would want to see it. Parents are sometimes skittish about anything scary that's live. I don't know about that, but I like the idea. And she said, "Well, I have this other client, Danny Abosch, who's a composer and a lyricist, who is really great, and I think you two would really be great together." And so at that time, I was working at a theater, First Stage Theater in Milwaukee, which is where it ultimately premiered. Danny and I got together. We felt each other out a little bit on how we work and what kind of work we like. And then it all came together really quickly. The theater in Milwaukee and Oregon Children's Theater in Portland had a lot of past relationship collaborating on shows. They were both really excited about it. The artistic director at First Stage is a huge horror fan. So he was not scared away by it. He thought it was a cool idea. So that's really where it started, I think. That was in 2015. I don't know, Danny, am I missing anything?
I mean, that was the long and short of it, basically. I from my perspective, it was, yes. I mean, I still remember where I was when I got that email asking me if I wanted to be part of a Goosebumps musical. And I was like, absolutely, yes, sign me up. I having grown up with those books and been a fan all my life, I was like, yes, this totally makes sense to me. So, yeah, and then it was. And actually, I think the part you are leaving out, John, is that they first thought it should be a play without music, and we sort of had to convince them that it should be a musical, which we were eventually successful in doing, and I think, in hindsight, very glad that we did. But
Oregon, I think this originally, when Oregon heard the idea, had already talked to a different playwright about it,
right.
And then when they decided they were going to use us, then it sort of became a conversation about the musical. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
And then a conversation about which book should we adapt, or should it be multiple books, or so there was some back and forth about that. But we settled on Phantom pretty early, and then John sort of wrote sort of a spec of, like, here's approximately what I think the outline would look like, and we sort of went back and forth and talked about it, and talked about where songs should go, and then kind of made a plan and started writing. But yeah, he's right, it was really quick. It was basically less than a year from when we got the call to when it was already premiering in Milwaukee. So very, very
it really is just a testament to technology, because Danny and I met in person for the first time at the first workshop of the completed draft of the show.
Yeah.
So all of our work together is done remotely, because I was in Chicago, Danny's in New York. So really, there was a lot of technology that really aided in us being able to collaborate in real time that we wouldn't have had, 20 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, this is probably one of the most well-known Goosebumps live productions. There were live shows in the past, not musicals, but there was like stage shows. There was one in Disney that was sort of like its own thing that had kind of a culminated, more so the TV show. It was more popular at that time in '98. And then I think around the time that the first live performance of the musical was happening, there was also something, I believe, in London. It was called Goosebumps Alive. And that was an interesting experiment. I don't think it's ever been done outside of 2016 or 2017, whenever it happened. But it was like an immersive experience that was split off into one for kids and one for adults. And the adults one was supposed to be like taking Goosebumps stories and like making them more adult. Like there was more very scary imagery. I think there was blood involved. Not super gory, but it was definitely more
Not just
intense.
monster blood.
Yeah. Something like that.
I'm sure there would have been some monster blood in there for sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, totally.
But this was going on around the same time, and I remember hearing about this through the pipeline, and because I live in Milwaukee, and I'm no stranger to the First Stage.
Did you see it at First Stage?
I actually did not. I was unfortunately
man.
to. Unfortunately, every time that it came to me, I was like, I really want to go see it, but I never got the chance to, so I never got to see this live, and I'm so disappointed.
Aw.
But that's why I was so happy when the cast recording came out, because that was the way that anyone who didn't get to see the live performances would be able to experience the play in audio form. And we'll talk more about the cast recording later, because that is a very interesting recording, especially considering who was all involved. But in terms of the live performances, First Stage, they've done a lot of sort of book adaptations. That's kind of like their forte. They would bring a lot of children's book series to sort of live adaptations for kids. And I just heard about this Goosebumps musical, Phantom of the Auditorium. And Phantom of the Auditorium, the original book, is a pretty good book. It's not one of the more iconic stories, but number one, it definitely makes a lot of sense to do a stage adaptation of this one, considering the kind of story it is. It almost makes it kind of meta, because it's a stage play about kids putting on a stage play. And I mean, it makes for a wonderfully meta-ish sort of story. But in terms of, so you guys said that you kind of came up with doing Phantom pretty early on. What was that like the reason you kind of gravitated towards it, was because it was a stage, like a stage play in the story?
That's part of it. I mean, certainly the fact that it takes place in the theater, the actual space that it'll be performed in, is interesting to me. I'm always interested in meta things anyway. Also, so they don't actually ever say Phantom of the Opera in the book, right? It's just the Phantom all the time, but it's clearly based on the original novella Phantom of the Opera. And of course, there is an existing, somewhat popular musical also based on that novella, right? And so that's like an interesting, different level of meta and relationship, right? And how that works. So I liked all of that. It was also, it's a very, just from a writing point of view, it's a tight story, right? It's got, a few central characters. It's a mystery too. Right. Not all the Goosebumps, obviously, most of them are not mysteries, right? I mean, there's always some mystery.
I don't know if I would say that.
What's
a lot
that?
of them. I'm not sure if I would say
there are a lot of
mysteries.
mysteries. I'm just saying that not in this way. There's certainly a section where Danny's scowling at me as the Goosebumps.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what do you guys
I'm just saying that, like, it's not a monster book, right? I mean, there is
that is true. Yeah.
And it's scary and it's menacing, but there is this known monster very early on stalking everyone, right? At least for me. There was something that felt very immediate and plausible about it, right? So that was interesting as far as just building characters and creating stakes. I also really loved that it had a false ending. Like, I'm assuming everyone who listens to this knows the book, but it's got this moment where it appears to be revealed, right? It appears that the Phantom has been revealed and everything's fine. We just have this nice little Act 5 where we all celebrate, and then it twists again. And I really loved that. And just, especially theatrically, I get bored at plays often, like you see it coming, what's happening, you're watching them unfold it. And I love a great surprise twist. So that was actually a big part of it for me as well.
Absolutely. Well, and that's exactly it. I do agree that most Goosebumps stories are not mysteries in the sort of way that this one kind of plays out, because this is definitely more of a, I kind of attribute Phantom of the Auditorium as like, if Scooby-Doo was set in the Goosebumps universe, because it's very much like, oh, there's a phantom about, okay, well, let's investigate, let's like see what's all going on, and there's like a lot of creepy characters, and like especially Emil is certainly like the biggest like suspect. He's the one kind of being like all shady and shifty in that sense.
Yeah, and I think that's actually what I was saying before. Like, that's the great rope-a-dope, is it trots it out. Like, it tricks you into thinking it's a Scooby-Doo thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then it's not.
And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you.
Yeah, like there's this moment of, oh, it was the old man.
Yep.
You're thwarting his other plans, so he had to use this existing legend to scare you away. Like, that is a Scooby-Doo trope. But I think the problem that directors get maybe with this script is when they assume that then it's a Scooby-Doo show. Mm-hmm, and it's not a Scooby-Doo show. It's a Scooby-Doo feint.
Right.
Yep. Right? It sets you up. It tricks you. It takes this existing trope that we all know of Scooby-Doo, sets you up that that's what it's going to be, and then, puts the knife in, right? So,
yeah. And instead of ending there where Scooby-Doo would end, there's a deeper level after that is the real twist.
And it's a dark story, too. I mean, people, I don't know whether or not people, like, really, like, talk about this, but Phantom of the Auditorium is a very dark and almost kind of sad Goosebumps book, because with that reveal, it's, I mean, even going off the backstory of, like, the legend of the Phantom, that it was this, it was sort of, it definitely was pulling from a lot of the Phantom of the Opera sort of thing, with the, the disfigured outcast, and he falls in love with a beautiful, it's almost like the Hunchback of Notre Dame sort of thing, that the sort of outcast.
Using Esmeralda as the name. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's almost like Phantom of the Opera with Hunchback. Funny enough, I mean, they were both silent movies in the 20s, very similar in story, but
both in Paris. There's a lot of similarities.
And but it is a very sad story, because even barring that legend, the actual Phantom, the ghost, the real ghost, is someone who was going to be in the play, and then he died through this tragic accident. And in terms of...
Spoiler. I'm just kidding. I'm assuming everyone who watches this...
I spoiled the whole show, so I guess you guys can click off now. Bye. But no, so yeah, the ghost is a kid who just wanted to play in the musical, in the stage play, and then he just tragically died. And in terms of the musical, in this adaptation, it's been a while since I read the book, but I'm pretty sure in the book his motives were a little more sinister. He kind of wanted to have Esmeralda come to the grave with him. But in this scenario, it was just someone who just wanted to play the part. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do all those years ago. And once he does it, he's free. So it's a very sad story. A lot of ghost stories in the Goosebumps books in the franchise, a lot of the ghost ones are definitely the more tragic, sort of sad ones, where the monster ones are the more fun, campy ones, which is interesting. But that's what I like about Phantom of the Auditorium. It's definitely a more subtler, differently paced story in the Goosebumps, especially in the original series, in my opinion, at least.
For sure.
So before we get
that depth is sort of what drew us to it too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was gonna say what. So you guys, before we get too far away from it, what was the other options that you guys were looking at before you settled on Phantom of the Auditorium as what's going to be your go-to for this?
I think I heard you guys
out of curiosity
say at one point that you almost, or would have liked to if you had to follow it up, like Ghost Next Door was a possible candidate.
Right? Yep. Yeah, it's funny talking about the sad ghost stories with depth and sort of tragic endings. That was probably top of my list if it hadn't been this one. And in a way, we sort of did both. If you notice, like because in a way, the ending to that one is sort of the ending that we put into this one. Really, the ending is where we diverted the most from what's in the book. We in general we stay very, very close to the book, but there are like really two key differences, and that's kind of one of them. But I think having that extra level of depth is helpful, especially with stage play, where you don't have necessarily the kind of like visual effects that you could rely on in movies, and so having that element there is important. Also, if it's going to sing, there needs to be some kind of emotion to it. So having some kind of story like that with a sad twist at the end, I think makes a lot of sense. And so that's why that one was high on my list as well.
Well, and that's
so no possibility of a Chicken the musical at some point.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine?
It just gets someone in a big chicken suit the whole time and just like, I'm a chicken.
Right, and I feel like when people say Goosebumps the musical, that's what they think of at first, right? Before they know anything about our actual show, they think, oh god, it's going to be that, right? And they sort of have an allergic reaction to it because of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's funny too. Just imagine like a really outlandish Goosebumps book that would not work as a musical, because there's a lot of Goosebumps books that probably wouldn't fit that glove. What's one? That Chicken's an obvious punching bag, but like, I don't know, something like Egg Monsters from Mars, the musical.
Yeah,
or even like Night of the Living Dummy. I feel like Night of the Living Dummy wouldn't really work as a musical.
Yeah, I mean,
it would be difficult.
Cover the whole stage in slime, and I'm just a blob. Like that's harder. Like some of the monsters were just harder to think about how they would exist live.
Yeah,
but I think the bigger question. I mean, Danny alluded to this earlier. Like the real conversation we had early was, whether we were going to write a Goosebumps musical or the Goosebumps musical, right? So like, and the difference in terms of, are we going to take a singular story arc and do that, or are we going to try to, what the movie does? I mean, I think love the movie or not, I think that what the first movie especially does is it's trying to be the Goosebumps movie, right? It's trying to draw on the whole canon and bring that all into one place. And so that was like on the table early. But I think pretty quickly we got to one. And I don't remember when it happened, but the first time someone said you should look at Fan with the Auditorium, I don't think I looked back after that.
Mm-hmm.
I think as soon as I read that book, I was an advocate that that was the right one.
That was the one. I feel like the one Slappy story that could have been turned into a musical is Bride of the Living Dummy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But how would you do Slappy on stage?
That would be. You'd have to have probably someone in a very obvious Slappy costume. It's almost like
I was gonna say just go back to Night of the Living Dummy
Avenue
3
Q style and have actual puppets, Avenue Q style, maybe. I don't know.
Well, Nick brought up Night of the Living Dummy
3 and see all the suit actors that they had as Slappy and
exactly.
Rocky and stuff. Just take that.
That was so weird. That episode had shots where like you could see it was almost like the Ninja Turtles effect, where you could see the actor's mouth inside Slappy's mouth, so it was really uncanny.
Or it's like the obvious human hands that were just posed into the dummy hands.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that you couldn't do some of these, but they would have been a lot more difficult.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing about Phantom is it's an in-depth story, but it's simple enough that you could adapt it for a stage musical. In a way that's not like too difficult, but you could still like have fun with it. You can still have fun with the set pieces, and I mean, from what I've seen of the live performances, they really go all out on the sets and like the acting. It's definitely like it's a lighthearted like sort of environment. It can be scary, it can be creepy, but it could also have that sort of like goofy fun atmosphere, and I think that's definitely what Goosebumps is it can be in the dark and scary and supernatural, but it's also, it's fun, it's silly, it's campy, it can be a little bit cartoony at times. I think that's the pure essence of Goosebumps, in my personal opinion.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has a huge sense of humor, and that's so important to it, and that's something I think John really brought to this is like the jokester element of it all. Because you're right. The Goosebumps as a series, the reason it works is because it's really half horror and half comedy, right? Like it's
exactly.
There's just so much humor in it, and if you have too much of one or not enough of the other, it just doesn't work.
Exactly. Well, that's I mean, we always find a way to bring this into discussion, but the 2023 series, I feel, missed out on the humor aspect because it went all into the horror. It went all into the horror, but it didn't feel like Goosebumps because it was trying to be too much like Riverdale, that it didn't have time to really bask in the campy aspects of what made those books and the original TV show so engaging.
Also
and so
mutilated the stories, but
well,
that's another topic.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another day. But one way that this show, I feel, so of course you guys landed on one story for the whole play, but one way that you guys were really able to sort of culminate all of Goosebumps is in the opening number, titled Goosebumps. Now,
My favorite one.
it is a great opener because even though the second song is the one that really sets up the story, the opening number really gets you into that Goosebumps spirit. It's sort of a spooky little like song, but it's also got a lot of the fun that you love from Goosebumps. And you guys were able to sneak a lot of references into that song too. There's references to Say Cheese and Die and Night of the Living Dummy, and it's a great song. It's a great way to get you in. It's a great way to close out the show when the reprisal at the end. I mean, for me personally, that's my favorite song. Because I think it's a great Goosebumps song.
Thank you.
I'm still waiting to see the show Down Under.
Yeah,
Still waiting to see
too. That's true. I really hope that happens.
Yeah, get on that.
No,
get on that. Get that production going.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're there.
The opening number, we almost didn't do it. Or I mean, we almost really just started with Super Scary Play, and I really pushed to have some kind of bookend number like that. First of all, there's kind of a long tradition of them in musicals, with things like The Ballad of Sweeney Todd or Magic to Do from Pippin, right? Like just kind of like opening, setting the scene, storytelling kind of numbers. But yeah, I think it really helps frame the show to have those bookends, and then also to have, when it comes back at the end, to have it sort of mean something different than to the beginning.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's a great way to get you involved, because I always saw how Goosebumps, the song, works in this play. It's almost like when you pick up a Goosebumps book, because I mean, you pick up a Goosebumps book and you just see the slime,
there's literally a frame,
monster. It's literally the frame of the book. It's the first thing you see, and thus this song almost acts like that, what you see before you get
that's such a good way of putting it
into the main story. It's literally a bookend.
Right. Yeah.
So but yeah, and then and then you get into Super Scary Play, and that is the song that introduces the main story, A Fan with the Auditorium. And that's another really good opening song, because you introduce the characters right away. You get to know Brooke and Zeke and what they want, what their goals are, and who they kind of are as characters in the beginning, because you get Zeke kind of pranking Brooke, and Brooke is like really, really nervous, but she's also like she really wants to do this play. They establish that they both are like big horror fans, so they're like super excited because they're doing a horror play. They're doing a scary play. So it really is a good way of introducing those characters and really showing it. And that's what a musical should do. It's like a musical should tell the story through music as much as through the the actual play performance.
Yeah. Funny enough about that song, I was playing that because I was at work the other day, and I had to clean out our shed, and I was playing the CD, and that song was playing, funny enough, and one of the girls walked in and she goes, "Oh my God, is that Goosebumps the Musical?" And I'm like, "You know it?" She's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so awesome." So she stuck around for a bit listening to it with me. That was great. So she was helping, but you know what? It was a win-win for me because she started helping me clean as well. So,
Oh man, I love to hear that. It's so cool that like random people in Australia even know about Goosebumps. The Musical. I mean, that's exactly like why we really wanted to do this album, is because there are so many people that don't live anywhere near where the show is happening, that there's no way for them to enjoy this if there isn't something like an album that they can experience. So yeah, that I love hearing that. Yeah, it's so funny to get these, random, like John was, I can't remember what it was now, but he was at some random like barbershop, was it, and it was playing, or it was someone knew about it, or I don't remember, but yeah, we hear all the time about like someone in this country is a big fan, and it's just like, wow, that's mind blowing and awesome.
Well, we
might have to do a world tour of Goosebumps the Musical. Like
yeah, I'm down.
Like
I would love to.
Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, like those big, like I would just fly out to go see it. If you brought it to one of the big major cities, like 100%. And Goosebumps is really popular in Australia, so it would draw crowds 100%.
I hear Sydney has a nice opera house, so. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, I mean, even imagine if this show made it to Broadway. Like, imagine that. That would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
That's the dream.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be
incredible.
Awesome. One thing I want to ask really quick. So I know especially when you're adapting from book, sometimes it could be difficult. And I'm wondering, did you guys how smooth was the process of adapting this story into a full-on, not only a stage play, but making it into a musical with original songs? How difficult was that process?
Well, I mean, it was helped by the fact that R.L. Stine wrote a pretty solid and tight story arc, right? So the bones of plot, I thought, were really solid, and we didn't want to mess with them too much. So, and it was also, when we were also like writing for a particular time frame, right? The theaters wanted it to be a particular length. So, when I am starting with the adaptation of the musical, and Danny can speak to this as well, but when I'm on my own doing it, I'm starting to think about like, what are the songs? Like, and I don't write songs, but I start to think about like, what are the songs that do things for this story? What are the moments in the story that, and I don't know that I can explain this, but that sing to me, right? Like, I think this moment sings. And so there are traditional songs that might happen in a show, like the bookends or the expository song or an I want song from the protagonist, or the antagonist song, or, a charm song. There are all these different types of songs you might put throughout this thing. But mostly it's just like, what are these sort of tent poles throughout, right? Mm-hmm. These landmarks of this is a moment where this hooks. So I started thinking about, somewhat traditional, 3-act play structure, kind of how long it is, and how we set it up. When we get this major inciting incident, how does that, rise up to this climactic, answering of whatever the question is, right? So like every story, an audience will stay with you until they get that big question answered, right? And in this one, it's quite obvious, right? It's who's the Phantom. Mm-hmm. But of course, it's not just that in this story, which is what's great about it, is there's actually a larger question of, what's going to happen to this Phantom. We actually start to like it's more complicated. So that's really where I started.
There's two Phantoms.
What also happened is that we got the gig to do this. It was all set up. And then the theaters were like, actually, we'd like to do it a year earlier than we thought. So you need to do this as soon as possible. And so I remember what I just was panicked. I have ADHD off the chart. So insane deadlines are awesome for me. Mm-hmm. So I just went in a room and took the book and just started saying, all right, if I have a day, I have a day to just plot this out. What does it look like? And so I cranked out a thing that was not without charm, but pretty messy. Some of it worked, but one of the things that made me realize I could be a writer was that I was a good editor. And of course, that's what all writing is. So the first, you've got to get to, I don't know, can I swear on this podcast?
Go right ahead.
Cool.
Yeah, right. So it's the shitty first draft, right? You've got to get to the shitty first draft. If you wait for it to be perfect on the page, it never happens. And so I got to the shitty first draft fast. And because of that, it was maybe even a little extra. And I didn't really know Danny that well, but if you're going to be a writer, you've got to have enough resolve to send something with your name on it that is not perfect, right? So I did that, and Danny felt about it how I felt about it. Like, there's a lot here that doesn't work, but we can see a path forward, right? There's some of it does work, some of it is fun, some of it is funny, some of it has to go immediately, or I'll put a fork in my eye, right? and then we'd had conversations about, my first thoughts on where songs were as someone who's not going to write any songs. And then Danny had different thoughts about where songs were, and some similar ones. And then, we sort of went off to work. I went about redrafting after that conversation, and he said about just starting to craft a musical life for the show. And then it was just back and forth for 6 months until we had, at that point, I think it was about 75 minutes of beginning, middle, and end, and this, a musical life.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it was hard and it wasn't hard. Like in a way, it was actually one of the easier projects that I've ever worked on, because the source material was just so solid that, like, sometimes on a project you're fighting against the source material a little bit. Like you're trying to fix something that didn't really work. In this case, it worked, and so all we had to do was not mess it up, really. And so I feel like that was in our favor, and also just that it like just made sense to me so much. Like, it just fit my aesthetic, and it wasn't ever like, oh, I have writer's block, I have no idea how to write this song. It was always just like, oh, I have too many ideas about how to write this song, right? I mean, which is not to say that there weren't some that were difficult. There were, and a lot of, especially like the ones that have to do a lot of plot, like Super Scary Play or Whodunit, like. Those were difficult. There are several story songs which are difficult. There are things about them that are, and also sometimes the challenge is not making them too long, because a lot of times there's so much information to get in there. It's hard to do it in less than 6 minutes, and you have to, because no one's going to pay attention that long. So those are the kinds of challenges. But those are the good kind of challenges, I think.
Absolutely.
And it was helped also by the fact, and this was maybe Susan was just insightful, or maybe it was luck, but Danny and I also worked really well together pretty quickly.
Yeah, we got along right from the start. And in addition, getting along is great, but we also got along while we disagreed about things or debated things or told each other we didn't like things. Right. Yeah. And if you're an artist, like, that's hard, right? But you have to, like, if you're going to collaborate, like, the best work comes if you're just transparent and honest, and you can't get offended and butthurt with everything that you do that someone else doesn't tell you you're a genius for, right? These things can always grow, they can always get better, and they always benefit from, like, vigorous debate, right? And we had a lot of that. I mean, I was thinking about this song, the most popular song by a country mile on streaming stuff is Story of the Phantom. And there was a moment where we weren't sure that was making it into the show. And it's hard to imagine that now, that it would make it into the show. But as Danny said about plot, we were pushing the envelope about how much exposition we were going to present through song, right? I mean, exposition is one of the hardest things to not make obvious or didactic or boring. Right. And the songs help, but it's still a problem. And there was so much background information required to fully get this story. Yeah. And we got away with it because the song is killer, right? Honestly, that's what I think. I think take the music out of this show and we just do this script, you're like, wow, they do a lot of explaining in this script. But the way it's musicalized and theatricalized, I think it's really a fun ride.
I'm glad you brought up Story of the Phantom, because I know I said, Goosebumps was my favorite song, but Story of the Phantom is a close second, because you're right. It has to essentially explain what the title is. It explains the story of the Phantom. But it does it in such a way that it just builds and builds and builds and builds, that by the end it's so, like, bombastic and theatrical that it really gets you hyped up. Like, you really, like, get invested in the story, and the music sort of really, like, accompanies that. Like, it starts off kind of like small and low and a little quiet, but then it just gets louder, more big and big and big until by the end it's just like. And I love the addition in the cast recording, especially the addition of that choir, that like just background choir just really added to like the bigness of it. And you can make exposition exciting as long as you you're right, you don't. There's a difference between like making a really killer song and then just explaining it. Because if you just had to explain that 5-minute what long story, people would be like, okay, so you'd probably be like Zeke. You'd be like, all right, cool, I guess.
You have to keep upping the ante or you're going to lose people's attention. But
exactly.
I love that you noticed that about the choir and all those little details.
I
always wonder, like, does anyone notice these details?
I'm a sucker for like background choir. I think it makes a song so epic when you like add to it. Especially in a horror-ish sort of song. I think really adds to that.
So we were just talking about that last night, as a matter of fact, with some of the other episodes of the actual Goosebumps show, when Jack Lynn's had some of his music had background choir, like The Haunted Mask, Girl Who Cried Monster, things like that. I think that was the episode we were talking with Eugene about that background choir and the music, because he was wondering who did it. But absolutely. And actually, this is my favorite song from the album itself. So as I know the guys, don't get me wrong, like the Goosebumps one is actually like my close second compared to Isaiah's. We're kind of switched here, but I absolutely love the inclusion of the choir. That just really set it off for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every song is my favorite song on this.
Sometimes people ask me.
That's a different answer, by the way.
I have a different answer every time I'm asked about it.
Yeah. I mean, I did that. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I did like a carpool karaoke where I just took the one
I did
line
see that.
from
That was hilarious. I love that.
Yeah.
Slappy was like, "Come on, we got to do this," and I was like, "All right."
No,
that was great.
Yeah, and I think this play did a good job really making the characters likable. Of course, you have the main characters. You have Brooke and Zeke, and they're very likable main characters. And it's one of those scenarios where the mystery does kind of have some stakes because, with all these happenings going on, Zeke is like the main suspect by everyone else because they established earlier he's a jokester, he's a prankster, he really wants to be the Phantom. So getting into that character, mess a bunch of things up. But so there's kind of that stake of like, we have to not only figure this out but prove his innocence because his role in this play is on the line.
The whole play is on the line. The whole play
is on the line, especially. Exactly. So there's sort of that like we need to figure this out now before or worse, like someone gets hurt. So it's definitely it leans into a lot of that sort of old school mystery sort of aspects where there's you don't even know if it's supernatural. There's just a very dangerous thing out there that's causing trouble and you need to stop it. And I really like Watch Your Step. I think in terms of like the tentpole songs, that is sort of like, I wouldn't say it's like a villain song in that Emil himself is the villain of the story, but it's definitely like the first of those songs that's really like that ominous, like sort of like this guy is bad news, and I think
creepy for sure.
It is a creepy song. It definitely is. And especially I love in the album Stay Away. Even though it's really short, I love that sort of like really deep like beginning, and then it's like stay away from my home sweet home, and then boom, like the nice fanfare that plays it out. Great, just great.
I love that moment too, and part of making the album was kind of trying to decide about which kinds of moments like that we should include, because it's not really a song. It's really more of an underscored scene. But I felt like including things like that were kind of important to tell the story for people who their first and only experience with Goosebumps the Musical is this album, because if you don't have stuff like that, then certain parts of the story are not going to make sense, right? There's really no way of showing someone that a phantom keeps showing up at rehearsals and disturbing rehearsals, right? And then when Tina talks about it later, they're not going to know what you're talking about. So like it was kind of picking a few of those key moments to sort of have just enough plot that you could follow along if you haven't seen the show live.
Mm-hmm. And
did you guys ever think about, like, when you are doing the performances on live and stuff like that, like, did you guys ever record it and then think about maybe putting like on DVD or anything for people who can't attend or anything like that to sell along with your other merchandise?
So yeah, I would love to do that eventually, but it's complicated for all sorts of like copyright and union rules. Typically, like with the actors union, it's difficult to get stuff like that signed off on. But I mean, I would. My hope is that one day this goes to Broadway and the Broadway production will be filmed and released like other Broadway shows have done. I have no idea whether or not that's going to happen, but that I hope it does.
Well, I mean, they're certainly trying to get that disaster Spider-Man show on Broadway. So if that could get on Broadway,
well, like you look at like Netflix, they did like Matilda the musical, like they did like that, like a basic, like almost like a movie. Like, what if you got approached to do like an actual like Phantom of the Auditorium the musical as like a Netflix movie or something?
Phantom of the Auditorium the musical. The movie.
Yeah, like,
I mean,
like kind of like Grease or.
I mean,
I've
contended all along that it would be a perfect holiday musical, like a traditional holiday musical to watch on TV, or Halloween musical.
Yeah, it'd be so amazing.
Totally. I mean, and like with Matilda, it's interesting because it was a book first, and then a movie, and then a musical, and then a movie of the musical. Right. And that trajectory is interesting. Right. And it's almost similar to this. Right. But I mean, definitely, I think this would make a great movie adaptation.
Absolutely.
I'd love to see that happen one day.
Well, this is an interesting case, too, because this was the only. I mean, most of the times when you had an on-screen adaptation of Goosebumps, it was the 90s show. That was for the most part, if you wanted adaptations of individual books, that's where you went. This is the only book that actually technically had two adaptations, the TV show and this musical. And personally, I think this kind of trumps the TV show version because I don't know. It's not that the TV episode was bad. It certainly wasn't. It's just not one of my personal favorites. I think it's on the bottom tier of season 1 for me. But I think the reason this one works is because you get in that element of, the music telling the story. That's exactly it. And again, that's why I think that this story was perfect to do an adaptation of, because it just worked. It was like the pieces just clicked for that.
Yeah, totally. And the bones are there, and you can really take time to flesh certain things out with music. And go deeper into parts of the story that the book or the TV adaptation didn't have time to do. Because sometimes also, I'm sure with the TV adaptation, they were really time limited to keep that into 1 half-hour block with commercials, and so there's only so much you can do in that sort of time frame.
Mm-hmm, exactly. But I'm curious. So as I said before, you guys had your first live productions for the musical in Milwaukee and Portland in 2016. And then I believe in 2017, it went to Roanoke, Virginia, at the Roanoke Children's Theater. And since then, I mean, you guys have gone to many places, including, I remember when the Chicago one was coming, I believe 2 years ago, I think. What was your guys' favorite spot to do the live show?
It's a good question. I mean, to be honest, I haven't seen most of them. I've only seen a few of the productions that have happened, and because a lot of them are in parts of the country that are just hard to get to. Mm-hmm. But I would say probably I'm a little biased, but my favorite was the one in Milwaukee. And I say I'm biased because I worked on it. I music directed it and was like very involved in the rehearsal process, and so I don't know. It's a little hard to see it with distance because of that, but. I don't know. John's seen more of them than I have, so he can give you a better answer probably.
Yeah, I mean, the Milwaukee one was the first one, and we were there, so there was more input, but also some really good performers too, some good design. It was, I mean, there was a lot of interesting things happening with that production. Yeah, I've seen a lot, and I've seen some other really good ones. I thought there was a great one down in Dallas. I thought that was a really, really solid production. Um, and I've seen some others too. I think where it's more like I could talk, and I don't want to do this too much. Where I think they've gone wrong. So I'm like not going to call any theaters, but I went to one theater and they were like, what we want to do? We want to do a Goosebumps musical, and we want to see how not scary we can make it. And I'm like, well, that's going to go real bad. Like, I don't know who your audience is then.
Yeah, like what, toddlers or something like that?
I mean,
some people think that.
The target audience was younger than it should have been, is I guess what I will say, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's the thing, is like the difference between a movie, you make the movie, you burn it to a DVD, that's what it is forever. But, we put out a blueprint for a show, and then someone else gets to build the house, right? And there's certain things they have to do, right? They have to just say the words, though they don't always, but they're contracted. They have to say the exact words. They have the music, right? But then they can perform it, they can direct it, they can style it how they want, right? And so I think that the real difference is, when you see this show, is that if you're the director, you've got real power on how scary or not it is. And the ones that just let the damn thing be scary are the ones that are more successful.
Totally.
And the ones that try to fight what it actually is, I mean, that's what you feel in the audience, that they're fighting what it is, and it doesn't quite work. So,
because I think part of that is that a lot of these theaters tend to fit it into their TYA slot, so to speak, right? Or some of them are just, they're picturing this as, we need something to sell to 5-year-olds and their parents, and so it can't be scary. It has to be just very cartoony and silly, and there are shows like that will work for what they want in that slot. I don't think this is that show, So the best ones are the ones that meet this show where it is and say, yes, let's go there. It's Goosebumps. It should be scary because it's Goosebumps. So let's let it be scary, and let's go all the way with it and not try to, back off just for marketing reasons.
Exactly.
It was an interesting thing in Milwaukee. Like, the theater in Milwaukee had a long-standing policy that they just never did full blackouts, right? So if like a bunch of schools came to see it, they weren't going full blackout because the kids would lose their minds and they'd never recover. And I really appreciated that they're like, okay, for this show, knock yourselves out. Let's go.
And I remember the first time they tried it, they screamed.
Yeah. I was like, okay, that's right.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to it, Goosebumps is that balance between horror and humor, and I don't think you can have one more than the other. It has to have that perfect balance. So yeah, it does have to be scary. It doesn't have to be a horror movie. It just has to be scary for kids. And I think you can do that. And I think, me personally, because I have a little sister, and she started getting the Goosebumps, I believe, when she was probably 5 years old. And that's the thing. It's like, I feel like some people don't give kids enough credit, because I think a lot of kids can handle that kind of stuff. Or
totally. I agree.
That's the thing.
I was
the kid.
Not all 5-year-olds are the same. Not all 55-year-olds are the same. I mean, even if you look at adult horror, some people cannot stomach 2 seconds of it, and some people just live on it and don't want anything else, right? And so that's I don't know. For me, I think all art and theater goes bad if you're trying to. You just can't make a thing for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they've done studies
not a really
on this, actually.
Thing anyway.
Right. No, that's true. They've done studies where they've asked parents of kids, what do you think is going to be too scary for your kid? And then they ask the kid, what's too scary for you? And there's always a wide gap between the kid is actually more into the scary than the parent thinks that the kid will be. Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember.
Yeah, I think the thing is
yeah.
I think the thing is just It feels like a lot of modern parents just like to shelter their kids from anything that they possibly could view as harming them or fragmenting their little minds.
No, that is absolutely true. And even beyond that, then you get the effect that a theater company is courting those parents.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so they're like, well, there are all these parents who are going to be, bulldozing, helicopter, being all worried about what their kids are going to see. So we should market to them. And then you see these sort of dreadful marketing pieces where someone says, don't worry, it's not scary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, every time we see that, we're like, oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I don't know how
you
that started
like,
why
hey,
everyone keeps happening
you should, don't worry, it's scary. That would be better.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry,
I think
it's scary.
We are going to
probably
scare the hell out of you.
not going to make it scary, but we are.
Look at a lot of the old. Look at a lot of old Disney movies and stuff. Like, those are for kids, and those have some pretty dark and scary moments. Like, Clayton's death in Tarzan, he's literally gets hung, and you see his hanging shadow.
Yeah,
Hunchback of Notre Dame. Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like Frollo, the Hellfire song, the way he dies and stuff. It's like, that is intense for a kids movie.
Well, that's
it's darker than you would necessarily remember or think or could be done today.
80s kids grew up with like freaking Gremlins and Jaws and Ghostbusters and
Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was watching Child's Play at 6 years old, so I don't understand the generation that came later, because my daughter, I raised her the same way, and she loves horror. So she goes to the conventions with me, she watches it all the time. When Goosebumps came around, obviously that was like super mild compared to what I was watching, but I still loved it to death. I agree. A lot of the stuff today, it's like, I really do think if you, as a parent, if your child's that scared of something like Goosebumps, there's a problem. You can be scared of it, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Just know there's some stories from these guys that like their siblings or whatever were like traumatized by some things. Like Bjorn's got a story he told the other day with his brother, and when we were talking to Eugene about the girl who cried monster. But that's a small minority. It is what it is.
I think it's more.
Girl who cried monster is legitimately terrifying.
It is creepy. It is a scary episode. Yeah,
he did a fantastic
all-time
job.
Greatest twist.
Yeah, it was that was a great episode.
But the fact that they came to you and said, "Oh, we want a Goosebumps musical, but we don't want it too scary," I would have just said, "Well, you know what? We're gonna have to change the title then, because obviously,
let's rename it to
point? It's called Goosebumps.
What's the point?"
Right. Well, and the problem is more that now that it's already written and people are doing it, people are trying to fight against its nature when they do it, and it's like, why did you pick this show then? If you want something, there are other shows that are closer to what you want. That right? Like, so I don't know. I don't. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think where it comes from is a concern that if you people are going to stay away if it's too scary, but no one's going to stay away if it's not scary enough, or at least that's what they think. And so they think, as far as marketing is concerned, try to err on the side of downplaying the scariness of it, just to sell more tickets. But I don't know. I think it's a shame.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, and that's the thing
100% is. Even when the name of one of the shows back then was the Fright Show. So, that was just in the 90s, but now I guess obviously the culture changes with time, but still, when you get things like movies like Terrifier out there, and I see, young kids dressed up as like Art the Clown and stuff, I'm like, all right, well,
that's a little more
an extreme film, but
it's like, look, let's not get carried away now.
I don't really sit there and like bash them for it. I'm like, you know what? I was like, the world itself is not a sunshine and rainbows place, and the more you shelter kids like that, I feel anyway, they're not going to be ready for it when the time comes.
Well, and even going back to like the how the musical is portrayed, it's like, yes, it is scary, but then you also have like songs that are definitely more upbeat, like Babbling Brook and Understudy Buddy. Even the Super Scary Play, despite its name, is more of an upbeat, like happier song.
Oh yeah.
It mixes. It's not like grim darkness throughout the whole thing. So that's what.
No,
I don't know.
Absolutely
it's just
not.
if you get a play that's called Goosebumps, and you know what Goosebumps is, why would you try to change it? Because you know what you're getting. It's like, why pick it at all? It's like, because if you're...
Yeah.
And it's kind of an insult, like when you work very hard on creating the essentially the skeleton of the show, and then they're like, yeah, we definitely want to do this. We're just going to change that, and that, and just completely work everything. Yeah. It's like, what?
When you create the Curly of the show.
I was thinking that too. The skeleton of the show. Right. The Curly of the show. I think part of the problem also is that the generation that typically our theater producers did not grow up with Goosebumps. They're a little too old to have grown up with it when they were a kid. And so they're trying to come at it from a perspective of what they did grow up with, which might be Scooby-Doo or something else that is a little bit more cartoony. And so when you say that they know what they're getting, they know what they signed up for, well, they might not necessarily. I mean, they might have seen the books on shelves but never read one. They might have been thinking, oh, Goosebumps, it's the Scooby-Doo of today, when there are similarities, but it's not the same thing, and tonally they're different. So I think that's part of the disconnect too.
Now,
and I sort of wonder if that's going to change. I'm sure someone's written one. And I sort of wonder if that is going to change once the younger generation starts getting more into those roles of being the people that pick the shows at theaters.
Well, we are living in an era where, people who grew up with Goosebumps and, other things of that time are now in those positions to make their own products based on that. Like, of course, you guys, Danny, you grew up on Goosebumps, and now you get to bring this whole musical to life. But even then, like, people making, like, the people over at, like, Trick or Treat Studios, who we've also talked with on the podcast, like, those are guys that, grew up with Goosebumps too, and now they get to bring that love and, cater to those fans, and in turn they make more fans. So that's kind of like the awesome thing about generational stuff, is that the stuff that was popular with kids back like 20, 30 years ago can be reborn in the modern world when those kids grow up, and in turn be passed down and live forever. So
we haven't grown up. We're still kids. We have not grown up.
We are children trapped in men's bodies.
Society tells me otherwise.
I still
did you see there was that more expensive whole thing? There was that whole thing with that actress from Harry Potter that played the from the second movie. You might be able to help me, Nick. She played Miss Sprout, and there was a whole thing about her that like the fan base hates her because she's saying, these kids, they're all grown up now that liked Harry Potter. Why are they still liking Harry Potter? It's for the children. And she's trying to say how, like, those that grew up with it now should just get over it. Get over it. She was full serious. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but you can't tell me that about Goosebumps. Hell no.
No.
I'll be 60, 70, and I'll still be watching it, loving it, reading it.
I will be literally on my deathbed, and I'll still be like, give me another Goosebumps book.
I was going to say, Bjorn and I talk about it all the time, being in a nursing home together with our collections combined. And
yeah.
And they don't go
and I've seen that collection.
Nobody gets the inheritance of the Goosebumps collection. They go with me to the grave.
Yeah, change my Goosebumps to pins and everything.
I'm gonna need a big ass plot to fit everything in there. But
I already in my diaper. Come change me.
I said I'm gonna be buried with Slappy, man. Like that's it. And I'm gonna make sure they do a big purple mohawk beforehand. Like, I'm preparing for this, man.
You gotta get a really cool tombstone too. Really like a Goosebumpsy tombstone.
Yes. Oh my god.
Just have the Goosebumps G engraved on it.
Yeah.
Oh, I will be. Oh, I just know it will be. I'll have it all.
I still remember the first time that I saw the tour of your Goosebumps collection on, I think, YouTube or something. I was just like, oh,
man,
how do you find all that stuff? It's just wild that it's like the most amazing collection I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Just being very consistent, checking out the thrift stores and eBay, and just, you know what? Like, I find with Goosebump collecting, it's the people you know. Like I get in touch with just so many toy collectors, that grew up in that era, and like they know exactly what they're looking for. Like, I mean, it's easier when something's packaged because you got Goosebumps written big and bold on it, but sometimes they might see a toy or a stationary item that's very subtle, and they might not pick it out. You know, like I've gone into thrift stores and I've left my name, and I've gone and there's something on the shelf, and I'm like, did you not see this? And she's like, oh, I didn't even know it was Goosebumps. You know, so like it's who you know. Like you got to find like toy collectors, you know, that can point it out like from a mile away, even if it's just got like a tiny little G or Parachute Press written on it. You know, that's what I'm always telling them. Look for the G. It can be very small sometimes not even colored. It's just clear. So yeah, no, it's one of those things with Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Or he reaches out to me and is like, hey, Nick, buy this for me and send it over.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper for you to get it.
Yeah, that's what I mean too. It's
they meet in the metaphorical alleyway and do trades.
That's right.
It's like the people you know, like if there's something I see. Yeah, like if there's something Nick sees overseas that like I want that I can't get, or if there's something he wants from here, like, you know, it's who you know. Like if you know people over in Europe, because they brought out so much stuff over there that you didn't even know existed, you know, like they had Goosebumps merch coming out all the way up until like 2001, which is really weird, you know, and then like the US, Australia, maybe 98 was kind of the end. So some places
also some of the foreign language books are pretty cool too. I have a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
The foreign language editions of the at least the original 62. Some of them are really cool, and the cover art is pretty interesting. I like how it varies from country to country.
Mm-hmm. The Korean one especially, like they are.
Oh my gosh, the Korean one is my favorite one.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the one for this with the illustrations? It's so cool. It's so cool.
They're really good.
So dark.
I love I love how goofy the UK covers of the original books were. Like how, especially Stay Out of the Basement, it's like, you know, you got the really creepy American one with the hand coming out, it's like green and leafy, and then you got the UK one, it's just like a really happy man in like a leaf patch, and just like, hey, how you going?
Actually, talking about, while we're on the subject of book covers, like obviously you got Tim Jacobus to do the cover art for this. It's almost like he got to revisit doing the cover art for Phantom of the Auditorium. So like, how did that actually go about? Did like you guys approach him, or like did he hear about it and say, hey, I could do an artwork for you? Like how did that come about?
I approached him. I mean, obviously it was always the first name that came to mind in terms of who should do our cover art was obviously Tim Jacobus. I didn't think he would do it. I thought like I'm gonna ask, but he's probably gonna say no. And so I just kind of was prepared for that. But then he was super cool and said like, yeah, I'd love to do it. So I mean, honestly, I was very nervous to work with him because like it's just like he's so iconic, you know, and it's such a hero of mine growing up that it was a little bit nerve-wracking to do that, but he was so cool about it, and I love what he came up with. And also like he just talking with him and getting a sense of like why, like his opinions on why certain things work, like because there were a few different concepts that we were deciding between, and this was his favorite one, but he was like, I think this one is the one because it has that element that grabs you. Like just hearing it, like I think one other thing he said was that his most successful images are the ones that have that focus on one thing instead of focusing on sort of a lot of different things. And that was what had this one had going for it. But stuff like that, it was really cool to get to see his opinion on.
Absolutely.
And then after the fact, we actually get to hang out with him at New York Comic Con for a little while.
Yeah, that was really neat.
Summer, and he couldn't have been more delightful. He was so supportive of just the album and excited about it. He was really great, and it was, I don't know, it's just cool when you see someone who's like a great artist and they've done something great for you. It's just still nice to find out they're also really decent, delightful people. He was really cool.
We can definitely vouch for that. I mean, he was the first
guest.
had
him on the show.
He was the first guest we had in episode 3 of all, like one of our first episodes, and he was super. We reached out to him like, would you like to be on our podcast? And he was like, absolutely. He was like, I'll do like this week. He was like so flexible, super cool guy. He has been amazing to us. And yeah, just like an utter delight. I mean, just every time we get to talk with him is just so much fun in just about every single way. So, I don't
have enough nice things to say about him. I mean, I've went like 2.5 hour drive just to go see him in Kentucky because he was going to be down there. That was the closest he got to me in recent years. But he's always told us, he's like, I'll come back whenever you want. He's like, I'll make sure I clear my schedule for it, blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, awesome. It's like, yeah. So, he's been really supportive. Like, we're really pushing to do something big for the 30th anniversary of the show next year. And he's probably been our biggest supporter about it. Mm-hmm. He said, I'll be your first guest. He's like, here's some contact info here that might help you out. I mean, like he got really involved with us to do a lot of things. And I mean, it's amazing. Like, just such a cool dude.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and also like so humble also what a legend he is, right? Like but he doesn't have any kind of ego about it or anything. He's just so focused on doing the work, and you can tell he just like genuinely enjoys it too. Like he just like gets so much satisfaction out of the actual craft. Mm-hmm. It's just really he's just such a great guy. He was it was great meeting him.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to continue talking about Goosebumps the Musical. We're going to get into discussing the official cast recording and all the wonderful people that got to be involved with that. But before we do, once again, if you guys aren't following Goosebumps Crew Podcast, make sure you do on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. This is, after all, episode number 21. That means there's 20 other episodes that you could watch right after this one. It's going to be quite a long night, so make sure you gear up. And also, don't forget to pledge to our Patreon. The link to that is in the description. Any donation helps. It can be as little as $1 a month. That money, it gets funneled back into the channel and helps us to grow and do bigger and better things. And all those links are in the description. And we're going to get back to more Goosebumps discussion in just a second. But first, let's have a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Trophy Smack. Everybody wants to feel like a winner, and what better way to feel like one than with a trophy of your accomplishment? As seen on ABC's Shark Tank, Trophy Smack is the ultimate destination for custom fantasy sports awards. Trophy Smack has what you need to celebrate your wins and losses with their large array of customizable championship trophies, belts, rings, and plaques. Their custom-made awards make for the perfect addition to almost any occasion, anything from fantasy football, corporate awards, gaming, wrestling, esports, and real sports. But even if you're not into sports, Trophy Smack products are customizable for anything, even for those who want a nice shiny trophy for being the best Goosebumps fan ever. Trophy Smack uses top-of-the-line materials to make superior-made awards that will last for years and years, and made to suit any price point. And if that weren't enough, not only does Trophy Smack have quality-made products for affordable prices, but they also include free shipping, free engraving, and 100% guaranteed satisfaction. If you want to snag yourself some quality-made awards for your fantasy sports event, visit Trophy Smack's website by clicking the link in the description and check out their large array of trophies, belts, rings, and more, and feel like a champ in no time. And of course, special thanks to Trophy Smack for sponsoring this episode. And now, back to more Goosebumps. So, as I said earlier, they're in 2021. So, before that, from 2016, 2021, it was primarily, whatever theater wanted to pick up Goosebumps the Musical, they did it. And, but because of that, it's harder for folks to kind of seek that out. So, for a while, it was, yes, there's a Goosebumps musical, but you got to kind of catch it whenever it appears. And it was like that for about 5 years until 2021. When we got a cast recording album for Goosebumps the Musical. And this was actually kind of a big deal at the time in the Goosebumps community because we were like, whoa, and the people attached to it. You had a few Broadway stars on there. You had Christina Abbado, who was known for Mean Girls and most recently Has-Been Hotel. She did a voice role. As Brooke. You had, I believe, Will Rowan played Zeke. You had a very big name in Broadway, Alex Brightman, who was known for Beetlejuice and School of Rock, and coincidentally was also in Has-Been Hotel. And you had like so many people. You even had R.L. Stine himself in the recording, which was pretty neat. How did that all come about? Was it just kind of something that you guys were approached about doing, or was it just an idea you guys had?
Yeah, it was our idea.
Completely driven by Danny. I mean, I'll just say it was really driven by Danny. And the other thing too is, you say, well, it started in 16 and then, it had 5 years of getting productions, but it didn't because there was COVID. And so
Yeah.
like in March of 2020, there was, I think, a semi-national or national 6-month tour of the show planned. There were a lot of things happening, but that just devastated the whole industry, including just halting all productions and turning all live theater on its ear. But now, I'm going to let Danny do most of the talking about this because was really his baby. I mean, people talk about what did you do during the pandemic. I know what Danny did.
This was my entire pandemic
all the time. And like a shocking amount of hours that he put into it. But I'll let him talk about how he put it together.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. This is pretty much all I did for like 2 years. And in fact, we were supposed to start like before COVID hit. I had sessions scheduled. Like I was actually going to be flying to LA to do Stephanie's recording in March of 2020, and then everything shut down. We had to cancel it and reschedule it. And so there were a few things like that really made this tough. And also like with recording the orchestra, because it was, during COVID, they couldn't all be in one room recording together. So we had to sort of get creative about recording them each separately. There were a lot of things like that it would have been hard anyway, but because of COVID, it was a lot harder even than that. But yeah, I mean, the idea basically came from kind of like I said earlier, this idea that there are so many fans that would love to experience this show in some way, and there's not really a way they can do that unless they happen to live somewhere near where the show is happening. And even that, I mean, I grew up on cast albums, right? Like I know a lot of musicals that are some of my favorite musicals only from having studied those cast albums growing up. So cast albums are just, hugely important to me. And so I thought like this show like really needs a great one. And we're only going to do this once, then let's go all out with it. Let's try to get like our dream cast, and they might say no, but let's ask them anyway. And fortunately they didn't say no. And pretty much everyone we wanted said yes. And so it's then we were like, okay, so this is really happening. And it was a lot of long days in my studio mixing and editing and orchestrating also. And then, yeah, I mean, and also like going to each of the sessions and recording with the actors and working with the actors was an adventure in and of itself. And yeah, and getting Bob involved was a very exciting part of that too.
Yeah,
so,
and as I said, you guys got some pretty like great talent. As I said, you had Christina, you had Will, you had Alex, you had Noah Galvin as Brian. You had Cheryl B. Ralph as Ms. Walker, Stephanie Styles as Tina, and like really, really talented people. Again, some of them on Broadway, and obviously very good actors and singers. Really lent to what you guys were trying to go for. Just crank the music up to an 11 in terms of production overall. And I wouldn't be surprised if, definitely this is the definitive version of this adaptation of the story is this version. And because it was a cast recording, it has more songs than the live production. The live production, at least from as far as I've seen, because the live production you can tell more through the through just normal dialogue in between the songs.
Yeah, so I think it's the same number of songs, but there are like Watch Your Step has an extended version on the album that isn't in the live show. So there's stuff like that. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But more like, as we were saying before, like Stay Away is not really a song as much as it is like an underscore. But there's more of that to kind of fill out the story because it's an audio-only version.
Right.
But it paints a really good picture. And honestly, I really like the cast recording because not only is the music just absolutely fantastic, but in a way, it's almost like I almost consider it like a really, really high production value audiobook, because you can imagine everything in your head as you're listening to the songs. You can kind of give it your own spin.
I'm so glad that you said that, because that's exactly what I wanted for it. And that's exactly what we were trying to do. And in a way, it almost frustrates me when I get the question of like, cool, so where can we see it? Where can we watch it? Right. And I'm like, no, this is it. Like you can experience it as this. Like it. So I guess people are used to like film soundtracks where like the soundtrack it's just kind of a side piece to the movie. Cast albums are sort of a different beast. Like I think the best cast albums can be enjoyed by themselves and not just as a second class citizen to the stage show. And I think that this one is that. I mean, it's you can totally follow the story even without parts of the scenes that would be in the show. And it's got like the best cast ever. So I think to me it is its own experience, and I certainly agree. I think it's the definitive version of this show, certainly the definitive recording of this show. My hope for it is that more people see it like that, as a thing that is an experience in and of itself and not just a companion to something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the problem with a lot of modern audiences is like they all just come to expect like more visual and vocal storytelling than actually singing. Like I hear so many people complain about musicals because they could just say these things in dialogue instead of singing them, and it's like that kind of just takes away the whole point of it being a musical. Like,
well, yeah, don't get me started. There's so many bad musicals out there, and so many musicals where the songs are just unnecessary or the score isn't good, or there's a lot of ways to go wrong with musicals. It's a very, very difficult art form. And it's also deceptively difficult. Like it's something that a lot of people who haven't done one think, oh, how hard could it be? And then they try and are surprised. So yeah, and some of those end up on Broadway still. So
Like I said,
I'm a musical background kid. I did so many musicals as a kid, like heaps. I mean, Bugsy Malone was probably my most favorite one I did when I was a kid, because it's like literally like it's like they're kids, but they're like adults. It was really weird. Like they all have like little fake mustaches, and but when they sing, they are like adults just dubbing over the kids' voices, like mouths, which is just so great. And it's like a gangster mobster story, but like they don't use real guns. They use like potato launch thing, a splurge gun, I think it was called from memory. But yeah, and one question I actually had, because I'm a huge vinyl collector and fan. Will we ever get a possible vinyl release of the Goosebumps?
I will say possibly. I would love to do that. Nothing to announce as of yet, but it's definitely on our radar, and something that I would like to do that at some point. I think that'd be great.
You could have like a gatefold, and you could have like in the gatefold, you could have like images from the show. Like I'm just imagining it, like how cool it would be. Like because I love collecting vinyl, so this would be one that I would love to add to my collection. 100%.
Totally. Yeah. No, and I'm sort of like an audiophile too, about like having that highest possible audio quality, and I love vinyl for that reason too. So that there's a lot of things that would be great about it, but it's also difficult, and also the plants are really backed up right now. It's actually hard to produce vinyl right now, but yeah. All to say, yes, totally agree. Would love to do that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe,
it's a maybe, yeah.
But also, like for me as well, like because I actually didn't start listening to the soundtrack until a few months ago, like after this past Christmas break, because in one of the other podcasts I'm in, we did like a whole Phantom of the Auditorium like episodes where we talked about the book, the episode, and also the musical at the end. So that was the first time I actually listened to the soundtrack, and when I saw some of the people in the cast, like I was hyped because Christina Lobato, like she also was in one of my favorite musicals called The Mad Ones, which is like probably one of the most underrated musicals that deserves to be on Broadway, and she is phenomenal in that. And of course, I'm also
in everything. I mean, she sings the hell out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then like seeing Alex Brightman involved as well. It's because I am a diehard Hazbin Hotel fan. Like I love that show. So seeing
Also,
Alex Brightman and Christina like both come into this is like knowing they were going to be in Hazbin Hotel when the season premiered. Because I found out that this before season 1 came out. So
did you know that Alex is a huge Goosebumps fan? Like even before he got involved in the musical, he and Bob both told me the same story separately. His first paycheck in New York, like the first show he was cast in New York, the thing he spent it on was Goosebumps books. Like he went on eBay, I think, and just like bought the original 62 Goosebumps books with his first paycheck from the like he's been a fan. He's like a Goosebumps super fan. There's a video on YouTube that you should check out of him interviewing Bob, and it's really funny.
Danny, tell the story of him talking with the sound guy on Beetlejuice.
Oh right, yeah, that's the other thing. So he was on Beetlejuice. He was Beetlejuice in Beetlejuice on Broadway, and he's I forget how it came up, but he was talking to the sound engineer on Beetlejuice, and he says something about like, oh, my dad, and then he sort of puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that he's talking to R.L. Stein's son, Matt, and who did the he produced the album for Beetlejuice. He did the, I think, sound design for Beetlejuice. He did some of the intro music for Beetlejuice. So he's like, wow. And they were working on the same show and didn't realize it until like pretty late in the process. He tells the story. It's really pretty funny.
I mean, imagine that, like, especially being a Goosebumps super fan, and then you find out that you're working alongside the son of the author of those books. That's amazing. Cool. I tell everyone that
he was never read a Goosebump book. He has still never read a Goosebump book.
That's his big claim to fame. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, just to piss his dad off, I'm like, that is just great. But you know what? It's kind of like my partner is the same. She's never read a Goosebump book, my partner, and I think she does it just to piss me off. I'm just like, why though? Like, it's like, yeah, like she's got
the money now.
Yeah.
Darling, I tell you this every time. I told them my last 7Xs. If it came down to you or the Goosebumps collection, I picked the Goosebumps every time.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's items in that collection that I simply could not replace.
Yep. It's like
but you idea I replace tomorrow.
It's like that meme of like, it was like, what, like, would you rather have me or the PS5, but just replace the PS5 with the Goosebumps collection?
Yes, 100%. Like, but she's got a big book library. She loves to read, and sometimes she'll be laying on the couch like reading a book, and she'll have it open, and I'll just like get my Goosebump book and just place it like on top of it. I'm like, don't stop reading, keep reading. Go. Like. Just like a transition, but no, it doesn't work.
So what do you think of your collection as someone who isn't into Goosebumps?
She likes it, and she keeps telling me like you need to store it better, and that's why I've lately I made a whole video on it. I've been sleeving up everything like in plastic sleeves, even like the soundtrack, like all the books, everything, because they get moisture on it from like people's when you're reading your fingers and stuff.
Yeah.
And also like you can get silverfish, you can get like just all sorts of different bugs and things. So I made a whole video on like why you should sleeve your books, and then I noticed other people start doing it, and I'm like, hey, here we go. Like we started a little thing here.
No, it's so sad like when you see one of the vintage books and it's so beat up, or it has like scribbles in it or library markings, or the pages are yellow now, and it's like, why don't people take better care of their books?
Mm-hmm.
I know, it's just sad, but yeah, it's sleeving it up just keeps it from getting it. So you just read it, put it back, and it just, I think it'll keep for longer if you do that. But yeah, to answer that question, she likes it. She just thinks like it's just getting a bit too much, but then she doesn't really say anything because she has a book collection herself and she buys a lot of plants. But she knows if she starts telling me to stop, then I can tell her to stop. And then so it'll be ugly. So we just keep doing our thing. And she said as long as it doesn't encroach from that bedroom, it's fine. So
just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's right.
Yeah.
I find it really cool that Alex is a big Goosebumps fan. I mean, I'm always curious, and we always ask, like, anytime we have an actor from the TV show or the movies or whatever, I always am curious, like, number one, did they know about Goosebumps before getting involved? And number two, were they Goosebumps fans? And I don't know if we've had anybody else that really said, like, yeah, I'm a Goosebumps fan. But that's really cool, and he probably was like 100% on the project.
He was, and I mean, I think it might be part of the reason why he said yes to it in the first place. Because, I mean, really, I mean, he's such a big star that he was one that I was like, I'm sure he's not going to do it. But you know, I think that might have been part of why he said yes. But yeah, I think the other actors had definitely like all heard of Goosebumps, but I don't think any of them were big fans like he was.
Yeah.
At least before the project.
Considering most of his roles, it kind of makes a lot of sense, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's right up his alley.
I mean, he definitely. I mean, getting to play Beetlejuice is already like a huge like accomplishment on Broadway. Yeah. And he's just got that like such big energy to his performances.
He's like, so funny too. Like in the room where he's just like
and he has such a like jokester. And he has such a distinct voice as well. Like you hear his voice and you instantly know it's Alex Brightman. Like
yeah. Also, there were so many outtakes from him of him just ad-libbing the most ridiculous things, and I just start laughing, and you can hear some of them like just laughing in the background. I'm like, Alex, we can't use this, but it's hilarious.
Those need to be released.
If you ever do the vinyl, have the other side be
the bonus tracks.
Yeah, the bonus tracks of just Alex's flubs or ad-libs.
They've done vinyls for everything. Like the Goosebumps movie. Yeah, like the Goosebumps movie had vinyls. They did the vinyl for the original TV series now. Like, and there's even like a special edition one that they brought out. So now I'm just like, this has got to be next.
Like, keep campaigning. Keep campaigning for it.
No, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I mean, this cast like seriously like just acted and sung their hearts out for this, especially Christina. Christina, like, as I said before, like, the story of the Phantom is incredible, and she just elevated that song. She, like, really put her all into it. And so did everyone else. Noah Galvin, who does Brian. When you get to My Story, like, that's a great song to kind of cap off his character. And again, it adds to that tragedy because it is, in this version of that character is someone who, you know, died tragically, and this is him getting to really play the part that he always wanted to play, and it really does add that emotional angle to this story that I think it really is fitting for it.
And you totally. Know, I totally agree with you, but I also think it's a matter of taste. Like, I think all 6 of them kill it. You know, and when Danny says, what's his, you know, people ask your favorite song, it's like asking who your favorite kid is. Yeah, it depends on the day. You know, you say you love them all equally, but some days, you know, some are more fun than others, right? Because I think Stephanie Styles is just pitch perfect, like is just so spot on what that's supposed to be.
Buddy.
and Sheryl Lee Ralph is just a goddess. I mean, and like, so they're all good. I just I love them.
I still remember you texted me during that session and just said, I'm obsessed with how good she is.
Yep.
Well, I also love in Super Scary Play, like how because Miss Walker in the book is supposed to be like really into what she's doing. She is like really, really excited about hosting a play, and Cheryl just does such a great job of bringing that energy, because in Super Scary Play especially, she's like, this, you just say, we're doing a scary play. No, she's like, this play's gonna be scary. Like,
yeah, no, the energy is perfect for it. And also, we didn't know this at the time, but now, of course, she's gone on to play a teacher in Abbott Elementary, and which she won an Emmy for. And so it's like kind of perfect casting for that. But yeah, she was also wonderful to work with. She brought her dog to the session, and we just like hung out and had so many laughs. That was great.
Yeah. Well, that's especially why I love Goosebumps, the song, because I think for the most part that was most of the cast involved with that. Even the reprisal had R.L. Stine himself singing part of the
song. Yeah, he has a fun little
not really singing, he's just kind of singing. he's just talking.
So speaking of outtakes that will probably never see the light of day, there is one where I made him sing a little bit, and I sent it to John, and John was like, "Absolutely not! You cannot do that."
R.L. Stine.
I wish we could hear that.
That'd be amazing.
Can you tell us what he said?
No, well, so when we had him record, I had him record a bunch of different lines, not knowing exactly which ones we were going to use, because part of it was I wanted to see how he did it and how it came out before sometimes when you're recording something, you get some extra footage that you know that you're not going to use all of it, but since you don't know which one you're going to use, you need to have some options. So he read a bunch of the different options, and so there were different combinations we could have gone with in that one. Same actually for the other actors too. Like for both the opening and closing number, I basically had everyone sing everything, and then I decided later in post which ones to use for which parts. And some of it, like there were some where it was really difficult because I was like, he has a perfect take of this, but it's right after another thing he just did, and so I can't have them two back to back like this. Thankfully that there were two, so like if I couldn't use one in the first, I could use it in the second sometimes. But yeah, so it's a different line than the one that we ended up using for him. And I sort of like played with the audio a bit so that it sounds like he's singing it a little bit. And I know that I doubled it with a bass clarinet so that it gives the effect that it's on pitch, even though it sort of isn't. But it's enough so that it sort of tricks your ear into thinking that he's singing.
That's real.
I love it. I should say, like, for the record, I love that R.L. Stine is in that last song. I mean,
oh yeah.
Well, and it's one of the things that's great about that song, just generally, both the opening and the reprise, is, the show proper, right? Like the actual story. One of the reasons it has all that exposition is it's a show that you don't have to know anything about Goosebumps to enjoy, right? You could just come in and watch this particular story without knowing, with no knowledge of Goosebumps. But I love that the opening and the closing and like the presence of R.L. Stine, like there's some treats for the super fan, Yeah. I mean, that was the thing Danny said, repeatedly going on is like, if you're going to work on an iconic series, right, of any kind, like you want to serve the people who love it the most. Like that's maybe not everyone you want to serve. You want to serve whoever is going to come watch it, but like the people who really love it, you want to make sure you're doing right by them. And I think even just the little touch of just R.L. Stine coming with a note is like such a sweet little bit, right?
And the fact that the line that is beware, right? Like the fact that it's that of all things is just like so. It's so Stine.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great addition. And then of course he is in I believe he's in Whodunit. And he plays the principal, and that's his only appearance, and it's fun. It's like I equate that to like how Marvel uses Stan Lee. It's just like he could play any role, it's R.L. Stine, but it's just awesome for him to be there.
Well, and it's sort of a tradition, like as I'm sure you all know, his cameos in the movies, the two Goosebumps movies, and he had the intros to the TV show back in the day, and so it's sort of a tradition of like you have to have the R.L. Stine cameo somewhere. Like
Stan Lee, it's just like you got to have the cameo in there somewhere. It could be anywhere.
Right.
But
and that was built for the album. I mean, Principal whoever, it's not even named Stine in the original, but Principal whoever never appears in the stage.
Yeah, and that scene in Whodunit is in the show. It's just Ms. Walker. There isn't a principal there. Yeah. So we really I asked John to come up with a few options to pitch to him.
Well, and it's interesting because me personally, and this kind of ties in with all that, is I honestly think you guys did make, we were talking earlier about making a Goosebumps musical versus the Goosebumps musical. I think you could say this is the Goosebumps musical because in every way it encapsulates all of Goosebumps. You have the song that ties everything together, that has the references to fans that fans will get. You have, R.L. Stine involved and all that stuff, and you just have the spirit of it. I think it just encapsulates Goosebumps perfectly.
You got the man himself doing the artwork too. And you got Tim's art on the cover of it. Like all the elements are there in the pot. They're all there.
And honestly, like when it comes to, I mean, there was nothing like Goosebumps song related before this musical came to be. Most Goosebumps songs that were created were fan made. Like,
yeah, I mean, I will say that the intro to the TV series from the 90s is pretty iconic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But it's not really a song because there's not really any vocals.
Yeah, it's like it's
Goosebumps.
Yeah, like that was like really all you had. And then this musical comes along.
And the dog.
Yeah, and the dog, yeah. Oh, that's another thing really quick.
Oh, and Cal Dodd, who was Flappy, did the dog, and he did the viewer beware, you're in for a scare.
He did the dog?
He did the dog.
He did the dog.
I knew he did the viewer beware, but I didn't know he did. So that wasn't a real dog? That was just Cal doing it?
That was Cal doing a dog impression.
Oh, you're kidding. That's hilarious. I didn't know that.
Oh, speaking of which, I should bring this up really quick, but at the time of recording this episode, we have a slight correction to make for our episode with Amos Crawley, because we were talking about he did a dub for an episode, and he had said it was either the Werewolf of Fever Swamp or Werewolf Skin. Turns out it's neither. He did the dubbing for Larry in My Hairiest Adventure. That all of Larry's voice lines were redubbed by Amos Crawley, and that's why because when you watch that episode, and I don't mean to get off track, but when you watch that episode, he sounds so weird. All of his lines sound 80-yard, and that's because they were.
There's so many. I can hear it now when he talks.
I know, same. Like the instant they said that, I'm like, wait, that is Amos's voice.
Yeah,
it is.
And like it's so obvious that it's dubbed as well, because like the way his speaking lines never sync up with his lip movement.
I can really hear it when he says, "Mom, Dad!" I can really hear it when he screams that.
So I just wanted to bring that up really quick because I just found out today at the time of recording this, and I just had to bring that up because that blew my freaking mind.
So the actor from the episode must have sounded terrible or something.
I don't know what it is, because he just said he did the inner monologue, but he sounds like that the whole episode. So I don't know. Maybe the kid was like, maybe his voice was cracking a lot or something. I don't know.
Something was wrong with it.
It's a Darth Maul situation.
Oh,
because that's what happened with Star Wars with Darth Maul. I guess with Ray Park, his voice wasn't menacing enough. So
they dubbed
that's
it?
not actually his voice in the movie. He's dubbed over with somebody else.
Well, you would also have to buy the fact that Hayden Christensen would apparently grow up to be James Earl Jones. I don't know about that.
I think that is the mask can make up for that, though. I can forgive that.
Maybe.
Yeah, the mask could have like a voice filter or something.
Yeah, it's a voice changer. It's okay.
I don't know if you guys know, but there's actually a video on YouTube which is, I think it's just called Goosebumps, and it's like a musical number, and it's like Goosebumps. I miss reading Goosebumps. They would raise. I don't know. I
think I know what you're talking about.
Well, that's one.
We have nothing to do with that. That's like a separate parody version that. We have nothing to do with that.
That was almost. I remember that video too, and it is funny because, like I said, most Goosebumps songs, besides the theme song, were fan made, and that was one of them. And it's actually kind of funny because that song's almost like a precursor to the one in this show. It's very similar in style, and just like the references. I prefer this one though.
100%.
Yeah.
But
I don't know much about that one.
Yeah, it was kind of like a fan-made thing. I think it came out like 2013, 2014. It was before the movie, I think. But I don't know. Yeah, so I mean, like I said, the cast recording is definitely the definitive version of the musical. I mean, it's got a ton of talent behind it. The music sounds amazing, and it's just, yeah, it is awesome for those folks that maybe didn't get to see the show live. They get to experience it. So, but what was it like getting I mean, you're going from creating a live play to just doing kind of a an audio only version. Was it harder than doing the live productions, or was it more simpler?
So I actually think it's easier because you have the ability to edit in post. And so if something wasn't quite right, you can often do something about it. Whereas live, you can't. It comes out however it comes out, including actors flub lines sometimes, and it just is what it is that day.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's nice to be able to edit. It's also a double-edged sword because it gives you so many options that it's like like John teases me about like, Danny, stop, it's done. You don't have to keep working. I'm like, no, but I can make it better. And you're like, no, it's done. Stop. There's a little bit of that risk too, of like just going overboard with it. But yeah, I think they're very different things. And they're meant to be experienced differently. Albums are, at least for me, more of an intimate experience. Like you listen to them more by yourself, or which not to say you have to, but I tend to. Whereas like a theater is more of a communal experience. Like it really happens with a group of people in real time in a space, a physical space. So they're very different things. And also like sonically they're different too, because you can, on an album, you're really right up close, and you can hear details that you probably wouldn't hear in a theater, which is sort of what I love about it. I love that those kinds of details are preserved for the record that you might not hear in a theater.
Absolutely. And when it came to this cast recording, from the looks of it, at least from how the community reacted, this release was definitely when this musical took off, because not only did this become a widely released album, but around this time you guys actually were able to open up a merchandise store and sell your own line of Goosebumps the Musical merchandise, which was incredible. Like there was posters, trinkets like magnets, stickers, decals, and even Christmas ornaments,
blankets, and pillows,
and shirts, and even stuff like lines from the show, like "Don't be a donut" or "Watch your step." Like really, like it was fun. It was fun stuff. I remember just like seeing those come out, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." I mean, that must have been a great experience to kind of just like, get that album out there and really kind of take off in terms of popularity, I would personally think.
I mean, it was so cool seeing the response to the album, and seeing how excited people were about it, and because like really nobody knew this show before the album. The album is the way that everyone found out about it, and also the expectations were so low that I think it was pretty easy to surpass them. Like people just either didn't know what to expect, or they were like, "Oh, Goosebumps the Musical, this is going to be terrible," right? And then they're pleasantly surprised when it's not terrible. So yeah, no, but it's been really great seeing the response to the album.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny how many people were surprised, right? Like not funny, but like, man, I'm really surprised how much I like this. And I get it. Like if I wasn't around the show and someone said, "Oh, Goosebumps the Musical," I'd be like, "Oh, someone is trying to monetize a popular IP, and it probably won't be that good." But it's great, right? And I honestly had the same thing when someone told me they made a Shrek musical. I was like, well, I do not need to see that. That sounds terrible. And I actually kind of love the Shrek musical.
Or SpongeBob musical. Like, I remember when that got announced, and I was like, why do you do a SpongeBob musical? And it was...
Well, exactly. But the answer is you have an existing story, characters, style, tone, whatever. You could turn that into something great, or you could turn that into something awful, right? It's all about... the adaptation and the result, and not just like the idea of making a musical out of this inherently is a bad idea. it's just, it's you gotta hit it out of the park, right? There's just not room.
Some ideas are better than others.
So, and we thought that about it, right? But we thought that about it all along. We thought that about it for 4 years when it was really struggling to get some traction. And so when the album came out, and like legitimately, like millions of strangers are just responding so positively, and really from like the two big, somewhat dissimilar camps, right? So the people who originally gravitated to the musical, you've got Goosebumps fans, right? And then you said musical theater fans, and there's some crossover for sure, but very different, I think, like groups of people and fan bases, like simultaneously responded really positively. So, I mean, answer your question, how was it? It was awesome. Like, it was just awesome.
Absolutely.
To have,
definitely.
And just for it to have reach, like to just have reach beyond whatever small, whatever community happens to produce it for a month, right?
Well, and as I said at the beginning,
I also just go ahead.
I just to repeat what I said at the beginning, like when this first got announced in 2016, it was like, well, I really hope like the other shows that it doesn't just stick around for like a year and then just disappear and become lost forever. And it didn't. And I think that this album really helped to like make sure like, no, this is not going anywhere. This is going to stick around. And it seems like after that, any live productions of it suddenly became events because people knew about it now. People wanted to go see it. And it's always funny too, because on Twitter, there's always people being like discovering it and being like, since when was there a Goosebumps musical? And it's like
kills me.
There's a
since 2016. Where have you been?
Yeah, seriously, it's like it's been around forever.
But I can't blame them. No one knew about it until the album, and also there are so many more people doing the show now because of the album, because the theater companies themselves didn't know about the show until the album. So yeah, it totally, and also it's just I'm really proud of the album itself. Like I think we did a good job on it, and I think I told John while we were working on it, I was like, I don't know what the response is going to be to this, so all I can really do is make something that we are proud of, and so that even if no one responds to it, we're still like, all right, well, we made a great Goosebumps album, and we're proud of the album that's out in the world. So, and I think we did that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really did have that impact, and I'm glad it did because, like I said, it's the most popular Goosebumps live show. All the other Goosebumps live shows hung around for a year and then just disappeared into obscurity. Except for this one. This one is going strong and hopefully continues to do so.
It's had the longest legs. That's for sure.
The longest legs.
And I think a great place to close things out. We asked earlier what other candidates there were, and we brought up Ghost Next Door, and I mean, me personally, I would love to see a stage adaptation, and Nick probably would too, of The Haunted Mask. Now that'd be a great stage adaptation. But
especially for a musical.
If you guys ever got the chance to do another one, would you do another Goosebumps musical?
I liked Haunted Mask early in the process. Like, I thought that was an interesting one. I like go for it. And look, I don't know how it would get done, but I would be interested in trying to figure out how to have Slappy in it. I think you talk about just iconic things about the series and bringing out a supervillain, and I don't know. And there's something about puppets too that is inherently theatrical. Like the theater has a history of how to incorporate puppets and is creative about it, but I won't pretend that I know how that would work. I bet Danny has more varied thoughts than I do, though.
Well, I mean, sort of. I tend to think that musical sequels don't tend to work, or sequels in general. Really, they tend to be not quite live up to the original thing that you loved that you made a sequel of. So, I tend to think that like this was the best version of a Goosebumps musical, and I'm not sure that there needs to be another one. But I'll never say never. I wouldn't totally rule it out, but I tend to think that this this one is everything that I think I wanted it to be, and I don't know that it needs a sequel.
Understandable.
Yeah.
I would totally agree with that. But no, I mean, that's 100%. This was an absolutely fantastic passion project, and it shows in just about every second, whether it be in the live production or the cast recording. It just turned out great. And again, I'm glad it lasted long enough to really gain that popularity and become its own thing. So
I'm so glad that came through, because yeah, it really was a passion project for us. Yeah,
absolutely.
And the nice thing about albums as opposed to live theater is they do stick around forever. The live theater eventually goes away, but albums exist forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly right.
Forever.
Forever.
Just
that's
like Brian.
That's a Sandlot reference.
Forever.
Forever. That was a dub, surely. The way he did it, it's almost like they tried to purposely make it look like a dub, because he's like, forever.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm sure it slowed down a little bit.
Next musical idea, The Sandlot.
Hey,
but
I'm sure someone's done that too.
That may last forever. But this episode won't last forever.
how would you do the dog? How would you do the dog chase? Sandlot musical. Like, I want to see that.
Have you seen Lion King? There are ways to do certain things. Yeah.
A human. I mean, the only reason why I thought Bride of the Living Dummy could work really well as a stage play is because you have a theater in the actual book and episode with the Jimmy O. James thing. You could play off that. Plus, you have a love story, sort of. Like, it's got those elements to Bride. Like, if I had to pick a slappy one, I'd probably go with that one.
Yeah, probably worked. But anyway, that's going to do it for tonight's episode of the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. Danny, John, thank you both so much for joining us tonight and talking some Goosebumps with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's so great to talk with other fans. Also, because sometimes with these interviews, you have to first explain to them what Goosebumps is, and it's like great to not have to do that.
Yeah, you have to do that.
No, this is fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, of course. And if you ever want to talk more Goosebumps, our door is always open.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, make sure you go and make sure you go and follow Danny and John on their Instagram, and also follow the Goosebumps The Musical account on Instagram and Twitter. And you can also go check out goosebumpsthemusical.com. As I said, there is a merch store on there. You can also buy the album from there. So if you guys want to own a Goosebumps The Musical album, make sure you go check that out. And of course, make sure you follow all the rest of the Goosebumps crew, Goosebumps Austrian, Bjorn Palik, Shaw and Nick Shaw, the Ultimate Goosebumps Man, Michael Lilquist, on their social medias and their YouTubes, because they really do deserve it. And of course, give us a sub over here at the Goosebumps channel and the Goosebumps Crew YouTube channel if you want to keep up with future Goosebumps videos and of course future episodes of the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. Don't forget to check out our Patreon, our Discord server, and the link to our sponsor for today's episode, Trophy Smack, in the description below. And next week, we're going to have another great Goosebumps Crew episode in store for you, so you're going to want to stay tuned. And until then, this has been the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, and from all of us here at the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, we want to wish you all to take care, stay safe, and have a very scary day.